Hello, I'm EnterElysium and welcome to IRL News. Today we're going to talk about Elite Dangerous and why its offline mode was pulled from the spec. So, Elite Dangerous is, well, I guess you would call it a persistent university MMO-ish star pilot game. Probably that's the best way to describe it, and it's a real horrible mouthful and a mishmash of different terms. But it'll do. And recently, as in like a week ago, they just pulled the offline mode. They went, okay, we're not doing offline mode, which had been in the spec and had been in the Kickstarter for it, because this game was kickstarted for quite a sizable amount of money. So, why was the offline mode suddenly pulled when the release date is only a few days away? I mean, release date is the 16th of December, so we're a very short time here. And they went, yeah, that offline mode we promised that was in the Kickstarter spec, we're not doing it. Now, there was a whole furore over will they provide refunds to people because people might have bought it for that, and that's all complicated and dandy, and it's come down to they're saying, okay, we're doing it on a case-by-case basis so that people can't just have played the beta a lot and then get the refund. But what I wanted to really talk about was why they pulled what was, like, apparently a core feature. I thought it was a core feature when I looked. It seemed very weird. And it turns out that Elite Dangerous didn't actually have an online feature in the spec before going into its Kickstarter. And then when they were in the middle of Kickstarter, some of the fans said, oh, it'd be nice if we had an offline mode. And they went, yeah, sure, why don't we do that? Let's put it in. Now, this is weird for me, and there's a few things wrong with this. Firstly, you'd think they would have thought about having an online mode before they did the Kickstarter, right? Because Elite Dangerous is sort of the reimagining of Elite, and Elite was offline because, well, in those days you didn't really have an internet connection. So why did they not think about having an offline mode? They must have thought about having an offline mode, and they must have discounted it. Surely. Either that or they missed something incredibly obvious going into Kickstarter when they're drawing up the specs for their game. So I'm going to go on the side of they probably thought about it and then said no. And then why did they introduce it when people said, oh, why don't we have an offline mode, instead of saying, no, it's not in our spec because of these reasons? And this comes down to, I think, a problem with, it's not a problem with Kickstarter so much, but a problem with people, companies trying to get things through Kickstarter. And we had this problem a lot. We had Double Fine overpromising, we've had Peter Molyneux doing, well, Peter Molyneux stuff. I mean, actually, he put it best himself, even when, you know, he's talking about his own game. Christ, we've only got 10 days to go, and we've got to make £100,000, for fuck's sake. Let's just say anything. I'm not sure I would do that again. So, yeah, Peter Molyneux admits that he basically promised anything that was far beyond the spec. And I think this is a big problem for people doing Kickstarters. They're like, oh, we need to succeed. I know. Let's just throw everything out the window and promise lofty goals that aren't in our spec, that involve massive design changes that are probably going to cost more money, and cost more money because we're changing the design spec. No. No, 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 no. You have a design spec, you go to Kickstarter, you get them to kickstart that design spec. Kickstarter's terms of service now actually have some form of legally binding, you're meant to produce the actual goods. They've been clarified, so no longer can we say, oh, it's just, you know, you're just putting money in, you don't know what's going to happen. There is actually some form of legally binding contract there now. And the problem is, people going to Kickstarter and then changing it, whatever, just to make it pass. Make it pass. We must make it pass. Let's promise the world. No. It's so blatantly a bad idea because it's going to get you just bad press. What it will do is it probably will up your chance of getting the money in the short term. But it's unlikely to be helpful for you in any way. Now let's look at something that I think did it really well. RimWorld. RimWorld went to Kickstarter and had no stretch goals. The reason for this was Tynan said, the creator of RimWorld said, he didn't want to be taking on extra work based on money. He had an idea for RimWorld, he wanted it to be this game, and that's all he wanted. He wanted the money to make that game. He didn't want to make it more complicated, he didn't want to add extra features that were pointless. He just wanted to do that. And that is exactly what Kickstarter should be used for. You shouldn't be changing your design plan. If your design plan is X, why change it? Surely you're making the best game you should be making for the amount of money you can get. Yes, I understand getting more money would allow you to make it better, but often the pressure there is to overpromise, and never overpromise. Overpromising will always lead to customers sad at the end, because overpromising means that you can't fulfill your promise. Underpromise, or just don't promise. In the case of RimWorld, you had just don't promise. Anything extra, anything better would be good. And that way everyone can go, oh, we didn't expect this, this is awesome. It gets you consumer goodwill, it gets you favourable reviews, it gets you everything you could want. Why would you do this sort of thing? And this brings me back to Elite Dangerous. What they did was they, apparently, it seems to me, although it could be entirely wrong, they could have just forgotten that the world of offline existed, which is disappointing. They said, okay, people want an offline mode, let's say we'll give them one. And then they tried to put one in and they found it was a bit more work than expected, so they decided not to put it in. Which is very disappointing, because I personally like to play my games offline just because I don't spend that much time playing games for me. I like to be able to play a game for me, and I don't want to have to interact with all the meta online and etc. whatever. If I want to play a competitive game, I'd play a competitive game. I see this as sort of a fun exploration game just in my spare time, just fly around a ship. So personally, when I bought it for the channel, but if I bought it for myself, I really would have bought it for the offline mode. So it really kind of pisses me off when a feature that was core, or at least core to some people, was pulled. And it was pulled because they just hadn't thought it through. They hadn't thought through the knock-on effect of not being able to pull down universe data. So, you know, changing, fluctuating trade prices and stuff. And this is an issue with people going to Kickstarter. It's not Kickstarter's fault. Kickstarter has given us some great games. We've still got things like, you know, I'd say again, RimWorld that's in development. We've got FTL, which came from Kickstarter, which came up with a free expansion afterwards because they made so much money for the Kickstarter. A perfect example of a non-promised feature coming out afterwards because they oversold the Kickstarter was way overfunded. Don't promise features and then not include them if they weren't in your original design spec. Just stick to the spec. Afterwards, you can always go, okay, we're adding this. Don't take away. If people buy something effectively, which is what you're doing through Kickstarter, sort of, and then you take away features from something they bought, sort of, obviously, that's a bad thing. I don't buy a TV and then someone say, oh, by the way, the HDMI ports don't work. Don't take away features. Don't add features when you're trying to fund to get it past the funding goal, because you're obviously going to have this bad press. You're going to have people writing articles about it. You're going to have people wanting refunds. You're going to have forums up in arms. Reddit will kill you. And I will make a video saying this is a bad idea. I guess this video is not just news about Elite because, well, we knew that the offline mode was pulled for about a week. I just wanted to know why. I didn't want to cover it without just actually knowing what was going on. And this is what it seems to be. It seems to be just an overpromised feature. And now, they've got several reasons for getting rid of the offline mode, including things like people can try and cheat offline and then they can apply it to the online mode when they go online or whatever. But there are several ways of getting around this, and it just feels to me that they just went, okay, it's a bit too much work and it would be a substandard version of online, and we don't want to include the substandard version, which takes more effort to do. So we're cutting it, since we're getting close to a deadline. It seems a little bit lazy to me, and especially in light of promising it as a feature. Now that said, it looks like it'll be a fun game, it'll be, beautiful, etc. I really enjoy the UI, I like flying around in it. But ultimately I think this comes down to, if you're going to be a small company or independent company or any of these things, just remember to stick to your spec and don't get carried away. I guess it's not so much games, it's just general business advice maybe. From me of all people. God damn it. Oh well. Oh, some people have asked why there hasn't been any IRL news recently, and mainly because there just hasn't been anything to cover. I don't cover boring, bog standard things on IRL news because it's like, oh, a game came out. Yeah, whatever. There's been nothing too crazy that I need to cover. I only cover things when they're outside the status quo. The status quo of games come out, they're either good or bad. If the game comes out and it is broken, that's outside the status quo. Because, well, that's a breach of the contract of selling you something that works. If they sell you a defective product, there we go, we're outside the status quo. Although, considering certain games like Assassin's Creed Unity, possibly the new status quo for that. Anyway, I've been EnterElysium. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave a like, and if not subscribed, please consider subscribing. But as always, stay shiny!